Hey YouTube, Do-It-Yourself Junkie 369 here, and today I'm going to be covering how to basically use the sewing machine to do a stitch. So most of the times you're just going to use a straight stitch, which is either A or B here on the selector, and A is the needles in the middle of the presser foot, and B is the needle is offset to the left side of the presser foot, and that's for like if you wanted to get really close to something like a zipper. And for you guys that don't know, this is the presser foot. Then up here you have the pattern selector, which is on A, so in the center of the presser foot, and then length is usually either length of the stitch in millimeters, or for most US made machines I think it's number of stitches per inch. So you'd have to play with this and maybe read the manual to figure out what length you want and what length each number gets you. So real quick, like I said, it's on A, and you can see the needle there in the middle of the presser foot, and then there's B to the side of the presser foot. And those two stitches are the most common. There's other ones that this machine can do, but most of the time you're just going to be using that. And then I use two distances for my stitches. I either use a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch. And most of the time, a 1/4 inch will be about from the center of your presser foot to the edge. And then an 1/8 inch, usually I run a machine that has an inner presser foot, but it would be like the inside window of this presser foot. If you have one with dual presser feet, then it would probably be the outside edge of your inner presser foot. And those are the distances I mostly use for seams. This needle plate has markings on it. So out here you have 4/8, which is obviously 1/2 inch, and then 3/8 in there, and then it doesn't have anything in closer than that. And it also has metric for those of you that like using metric, and it looks like it might be in millimeters, so 10, 15, and 20. So if you haven't set up your machine, read the instruction book, figure out how to thread it, and go back if you need some help and check out my first video. But other than that, now I'm going to show you how to run a basic stitch through fabric. And here I have some 1000 denier Cordura, and I've just folded it over. And basically we're going to put the edge of this on the outside of the presser foot, which will give us a 1/4 inch seam. So I position it where I want, and then for the first starting it, I push the needle down through the fabric, and that holds it in place. And then from there you want to lower your presser foot, and usually there's a lever somewhere on the back of your machine that will do that. On this one, it's right here behind the needle post. And basically with the new machine, you want to do this, just grab a piece of scrap fabric and test out, get a feel for the speed and how the machine stitches. And then also this will give you an idea of how your tension is set. And you just kind of take the loose end here, let it feed through, and by moving this back and forth you can steer the fabric. And you want to keep this edge on the edge of that presser foot to get your 1/4 inch seam. And now we want to go a 1/4 inch from this edge, and to get that, usually I hand walk by turning this crank. That will move the machine, and you always want to turn this towards you. If you turn it the other direction, stuff in here could bind up and cause a malfunction with your machine that might require you to take it to a repair shop. So So basically we're going to hand walk this until we get a 1/4 inch from the edge. And since this is a 90-degree turn, I'll leave the needle down through the fabric, so that will tie the fabric in place and lift the presser foot. And this will allow me to turn the fabric. And then you just drop your presser foot back down and start sewing along this edge. And that's how you do a sharp 90-degree corner. On this one, I'm going to turn the stitch length down to 3. Now here is a rounded edge. So to turn 90, you had to leave the needle down, pick the presser foot up, and spin the fabric. On this one, as you're stitching, you'll just turn the fabric like that. And that's how you go around a rounded edge. And then down this straight, we'll turn the dial down to 2. And same thing going around this corner. Now let's put it on 1, see what that gets us. Now, let's say you wanted to sink your finishing stitch right into this already existing stitch. We're going to hand walk this over here, and depending on how your sewing is going and what distance you covered and stitch length and all that, you might not get the needle to drop exactly in that hole. And basically what you do is you pull the needle up till it's just about to go in the fabric, and then you can lift your presser foot and line the needle up with that hole, and then manually put the needle down through the hole. And that's how you would finish that stitch. And that'll become more important when we go over W stitches and box stitches, box X stitches. In the finish, you pull the needle up to the top of its stroke. Remember I said you want this take-up lever all the way to the top and then of its travel, and that usually will have the needle out of the fabric. Then you lift your presser foot and you drag the material out from under there, which pulls some thread with it. And like I said, you want to leave about 5 to 6 inches of thread on the machine, so you pull a little bit past that and then cut with your scissors. And then here where I have this extra thread, you just trim that down as close to the fabric as you can get it. But if I did that on this one, these stitches are able to pull out, because what I didn't do in this example is I didn't lock the stitches in. So I'll go back on this and show you how to do that in a minute. But looking at this, we have our dial set to 1, which the stitches are so small I can barely tell them apart from one another. Over here is 2. The stitches are a little bit bigger. Here is 3, and then over here is 4. And 4 is about the stitch length I'm used to doing. But one thing about this dial is it doesn't have to be set exactly to 2 or to 1. You have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 10 clicks in between each one of these settings. And then maybe in a later video, when you come over here to the stretch stitch setting, it moves you down into making stitches like this. And they get smaller and tighter as you turn this way, and larger and more open as you turn this way. And basically, instead of doing one line of stitches, it would put down 3 lines of stitching at one time. So for right now, we'll just leave this on 4, since that's what I'm used to. And we'll go over how to lock in your stitches so they don't come apart when you trim the end of the stitch down. Which I don't know if this one will do it, but basically here where the stitching starts and ends, if I could pull on it, these stitches would pull apart since there's nothing holding them in there. So what you want to do when you start, put your needle in the fabric, drop the presser foot, go forward about 3 stitches or 4. I think I did 5 in this case. And then you're going to back up over those same stitches, and that thread going back over those stitches locks them down. The thread that you just sewed over is bound by the thread that you sewed on there, if that makes any sense. And basically, here's your reverse lever. Every machine I've used has a lever in about this area, and you don't want to push this while the machine's in the middle of the stitch, but when the needle comes up to the top, if you hold this down, it'll switch directions and you don't even have to let off the pedal. So we'll push that down. Go back over the existing stitches. Those are now locked in. And then you just start sewing. And to get used to your machine, you can take a piece of fabric like this and just do straight lines. So you go down until you hit the end of the fabric, turn it 90 degrees, drop the presser foot. Maybe you do about 2 stitches that way. Turn the fabric around again. And now I've moved over 1/4 of an inch, so I can just run my presser foot down this stitch line and get used to how the machine stitches. And that's what I recommend for using a machine that you're unfamiliar with. Like every time I sit down at a new machine, I do this a little bit, kind of get an idea if it's adjusted correctly, if the tension's set right, how fast it goes. And you can just eat up the whole piece of scrap fabric this way. Practicing. Oops. I didn't hand lock that and I ended up with 3 stitches instead of 2. And then how you'd want to end your stitches, you want to lock them in again. So here we're going forward, and now we're going backwards. And you don't need it to go that far. You just need like 3 or 4 stitches locked in. And then you get your take-up lever at the top of its travel, raise the presser foot, and drag the fabric off of there, and then trim the thread. And that's the basics of how stitches are formed. And I did say I was going to show you the thread being pulled up out of the bobbin as I'm sewing. So we'll go ahead and do that now, since after that this will be pretty much the end of the video. I showed you how to make stitches, how to turn corners, how to go around curved areas, and how to get your seam width correctly. As a side note on that, I wouldn't go under 1/8 of an inch, otherwise it might pull out the side of the fabric. So after I show you this, that'll be pretty much the end of this video, and then the next one will be how to use a seam ripper. Because if you start sewing and you make a mistake, This is how you remove that mistake, so you don't have to cut all new fabric and start over. Or sometimes if you're doing a repair, sometimes you'll have to take a seam out to get to what you need to repair. So here is the bobbin, and if we look real close, we'll see the top thread get looped around it. I might have to slow this down so you can see it in slow motion. But the thread is looping around that as I sew. I'm going to have to slow it down later. So that's the video. Hope you enjoyed it, found it informational. Please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and come back for our next video, which will be how to use the seam ripper when you mess up. And there's really no horrible way to use the seam ripper, but the way I've been doing it I found to be the easiest. So I'll get all this cleaned up, and then we'll probably come back and rip the seam out of this piece of fabric, just to give you some tips on how to use that. Thanks for watching.